The European Poker Tour is back in Barcelona for the first super high roller of the season.
When you're winning, other players tend to be a little bit afraid of you and you can run them over.
Actions on Steven Silverman. Queens under the gun.
Silverman was on the American Poker reality show 2 months, 2 million. It was the highest rated poker reality show in its time slot starring Steve Silverman.
He's raised to 15,000. Dan Smith has Queen Jack suited.
Dan's in rough shape, but he's got the exact kind of hand you can sometimes crack bigger hands with.
He calls. Negranu's out. Azar, Bakar, and Siva. Ravensbeck will fold the big blind, so we're heads up to the flop.
The European Poker Tour is back in Barcelona for the first super high roller of the season.
When you're winning, other players tend to be a little bit afraid of you and you can run them over.
Actions on Steven Silverman. Queens under the gun.
Silverman was on the American Poker reality show 2 months, 2 million. It was the highest rated poker reality show in its time slot starring Steve Silverman.
He's raised to 15,000. Dan Smith has Queen Jack suited.
Dan's in rough shape, but he's got the exact kind of hand you can sometimes crack bigger hands with.
He calls. Negranu's out. Azar, Bakar, and Siva. Ravensbeck will fold the big blind, so we're heads up to the flop. And that flop is Jack, Jack 5, trips for Smith.
Hi-ya! Steve's almost always going to bet this because he's almost always going to have the best hand.
He does continue for 27,000.
I don't think he's folding.
Nope. He calls.
Dan opts to just calls. There are plenty of hands he could peel a turn with that aren't nearly as strong.
6 of spades on the turn. Smith with a virtual lock on the hand, 98% equity.
None of these cards are really saving Silverman.
Bets again, 65,000.
Now, does Dan raise or just call and go for all his value on the river?
He calls.
River it is.
230,000 in the middle, Silverman with not much more than that behind. The case jack on the river, quads for Dan Smith.
This is just a horrific card for Silverman. He's now got a full house, and in his mind, he's only losing the aces or kings, which probably would have gotten him 3-bet pre-flop.
Silverman shoves.
Oy.
Call.
Dan Smith calls.
Quick check of the quads.
Put in.
No kidding.
That is just brutal.
Steven Silverman eliminated.
Good luck, guys. Appreciate that.
He folds. Eric Seidel opens from under the gun +1 with ace-queen to 16,000. Dan Smith has kings.
Almost always going to see a 3-bet with kings.
Not this time. He just calls.
Interesting. Dan's not wanting to look too strong, so he just calls. Calling reps a much wider range, and there's always a chance someone gets cute behind you.
Heads up to the flop. Quack, quack, quack.
Eric will probably continue with what he presumes will be the best hand a big percentage of the time. Dan, of course, flops a full house.
Seidel does continue for 18,000.
Let's see if Dan continues to play this deceptively by just calling. I think raising here would be a real mistake.
He does call.
Don't want to chase away that action.
The turn is a queen. Seidel now has a full house.
Really terrible card for Eric. He's now going to have the best hand almost all of the time.
Fires again. 25,000.
We know Eric is more likely to call a raise here than I am to call an ex-girlfriend after 2 a.m., but does Dan know that?
Dan does raise, makes it 75,000 total.
Dan claims to keep his cool in these spots. What do you people think? Is he giving anything away? Let us know on Twitter, #@EVT Barcelona. Now, don't get me wrong, this raise looks extremely strong, but A, Dan's had quads once already. What are the odds? Am I right, people? B, B, and C closing. Always be closing.
Eh?
I remember now. Even though that raise looks super strong, there are, in Eric's mind, only 2 hands that are beating him, kings and aces. And what are the odds Dan flatted with those pre-flop?
On this occasion, he did. Seidel now checks the river, having called Smith's raise on the turn.
Would have been really sick if a deuce had hit. Dan obviously has to bet again, but he can't be like me when a girl lets me buy her a drink in a bar, all eager. That's how you scare him off.
234,000 in the pot. He bets 200,000.
This is just a gross spot for Eric, you can tell, because all the liquid just drained from his body. You can't fault him for thinking about this, and you can't fault him if he eventually calls either. You can, however, throw him a parade if he somehow manages to lay this down. This is your run-of-the-mill / incredibly rare cooler crying call.
He can't get away from it. He calls, and Smith gets maximum value.
Eric Seidel's been getting brutalized by Dan Smith today.
Seidel loses 310,000 there.
Dan, don't say anything. Don't look at him. He is a legend.
I like the way he played that. And all things considered, I think it was really, really good way to play it.
Quiet, Daniel. He's right there.
So Dan Smith extends his chip lead. He's now playing. He's in the cutoff, and he has pocket aces.
Well, if you're looking to be the chip leader, I always recommend picking up aces. I don't know why more players don't do it. It's a no-brainer.
He raises to 14,000. Negreanu has jacks.
Daniel's been pretty miserable so far today, and it looks like he might get his wish for it all to be coming to an end.
I'm gonna make it 38,000. And when I screw it up and end up
That'll be a 3-bet.
in potpourri of the mess.
Math is hard. Dr. Scalp is out of there.
Back on Smith.
I'm thinking re-raise.
Which will probably induce a shove, which will be called.
Okay, good luck. I call.
Sure enough.
That's good. I was like, whatever, let's just do it. I told you no thinking today, no matter what, I promised.
Story checks out.
I was happy he raised me. I really was. I wanted to get it in, but not against that. The prepay.
I don't think you're allowed to get cute when you have aces. None of that.
No jack.
Not even close.
Negreanu is going to need to see a jack on the turn or river to survive.
Aces, huh?
Yep.
Just the river to come. 2 outs for Daniel Negreanu.
Good luck, man. I don't think it's coming anymore. I changed my mind.
Insurance?
He's in this tournament for 100,000. He's got an amazing record in the Super High Roller format. He's 3 for 3 so far.
Dan Smith. He can do it.
Make that 3 for 4.
Good luck, man. All right, bud. Good luck, y'all.